I'm just gonna let the intro play out to set the mood for this video. This is Banjo-Kazooie, the well-known series on the Nintendo 64, which has gone down in history as one of the greatest games known to man. Developed by Rare and released in 1998, Banjo-Kazooie left a mark on the gaming industry that was getting a jump start into the realm of open-world 3D platformers alongside Mario 64 and Spyro the Dragon. Funnily enough, I live and breathe this genre of gaming, so when it came to Banjo-Kazooie, I had a hunch I was in for a good time. What started off as a Super Nintendo project called Dream completely shifted gears from a standard RPG game to the open world adventure we know today. A year before this game, Banjo actually started off in Diddy Kong Racing, but that would only be the tip of the Freeze Easy Peak iceberg. Friends I've been talking to have been telling me for years how I've been missing out, as Banjo-Kazooie is one of the games everyone was fascinated with, and with me being the odd one out, I should probably explain myself here. A few years back, I want to say mid-2000s, I remember playing this game on my Nintendo 64 and getting genuinely freaked out despite how cutesy and cartoony it appeared to be. Might have had something to do with me exploring through a witch's dark, moody cave, getting jump scared by these things jumping through the walls, and to top it all off, making the simple mistake of calling it quits only to find the game punishing me for doing so with a game over that scared the hell out of 10-year-old me. I was a pretty weak kid back then. Coming back to it in recent years, it's been brought to my attention that Banjo-Kazooie will be part of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate's DLC pass, which, as I've stated before, is a noteworthy addition. I loved his mash attacks, but wasn't a fan of his specials. I thought the transition was iffy in several areas. Back on point, people were hyping this up and friends were telling me how I should play this ASAP, so I returned to my Nintendo 64 card to find that, yeah, this was something really cool. But after a while, I fell out of loop and that would be the end of it. Up until this point where I decided to pick up the Rare Replay set, a collection of games on the Xbox One depicting a majority of Rare's library, including the Bear and Bird itself. I had the honor of playing this game in full, so I thought I'd dive into my full experience with Banjo-Kazooie. Strap yourselves in, folks, we're in for a wild one. For starters, I'm gonna do things a bit differently. I usually kick this off with the plot of the game and move my way forward, but I want to take this minute to talk about the characters at large. I've always said Banjo-Kazooie had a lively cast of characters, and the best place to start would be with the titular duo. Banjo is more relaxed and laid back, while Kazooie is that big-mouthed jerk-ass who's always talking down to people at every opportunity. They work so well off each other that their exchanges are always fun to watch. It's all great chemistry in action. There's a handful of side characters in the mix, but I want to highlight the most notable ones. There's Bottles, who serves as our tutorial aid for all the abilities the game has in store. Mumbo Jumbo is that cool looking magic whiz who's always got a spell ready when you need it. Banjo's little sister Tootie, who we only see once in this single game alone and then never again afterwards. Captain Blubber, whose speech pattern is perhaps the best thing ever. Clanker, who I can't help but feel sorry for, and the one that caught my eye the most is Tip Top. You know, that same guy from Diddy Kong Racing? I'm so glad the connection here is still strong. But of all these characters, there is none more effective than Gruntilda, the big bad of the show. A nasty old witch speaking in rhymes who's out for vengeance to be the prettiest face in all the land. And throughout the entire game, she's mocking you and taunting your progression the further you get in. All this culminates in an ending that's more satisfying than ever once she goes down, effectively making her a standalone villain. Many people sing songs of praise towards Gruntilda, some even going as far as to dub this concept the Gruntilda effect. I'm slightly paraphrasing, but I definitely see what they're getting at. Sometimes just being reminded what you're up against and what you're actually fighting for goes a long way in adding to the experience. And what better time to jump into the story than now? After learning that Banjo's sister is far prettier than she'll ever be, Gruntilda storms off to capture Tootie and plans to use her in this giant beast of a machine, which will make herself more presentable while trading her ugliness over to Tootie. From there, Banjo and Kazooie wake up to find what Grunty's up to, and from there, it's up to stop the wicked witch and put her in her place once and for all. Now, if I were to make any comparisons here, this is more or less the same sort of vibe as the first Spyro the Dragon, where the plot kinda takes a backseat in favor of the gameplay, which isn't necessarily a bad thing so long as the game itself is worth enjoying, and what we have here at Banjo-Kazooie is just that. Also, I'm sensing a pattern here. A green ugly hag kickstarting the plot over getting worked up by their appearance, both released in the same year. It's almost like it was fate or something. Anyway, the gameplay is surprisingly easy to get a grip on despite how huge the world of Banjo may seem at first. You get a pretty standard moveset with the Baron Bird. You can jump, flutter to glide across wide distances, barge at enemies, stomp down projectiles, give them a good pecking, talon trot to run around much faster, and the list goes on. You learn all your moves through the first half of the game and will usually be putting everything you pick up to good use from there. And to my surprise, it's all great stuff once you get the hang of it. It's especially satisfying when you get enough of a grip on the flying to get yourself all the way to the top for that one collectible and stick that landing with the perfect swan dive. Feels so good, man. Swimming felt off at first, but holding the shoulder buttons helped me get my way around corners much more comfortably. Unfortunately, this is one of those games where swimming too long means instant death, so you got little room for error before you gotta reach the surface for health. If this allowed more free reign underwater, I feel this would be a non-issue, but as it is, I can handle it, for the most part. Gonna come back to this in a bit. Your main collectibles in this game consist of Jiggies, which are the end-all be-all goal of Banjo-Kazooie. You use these to access other worlds scattered throughout Grunty's lair. Jinjos are located in every level, usually hidden so well off the beaten path. Finding all of them in a level grants you yet another Jiggy for the collection. These skulls, or Mumbo tokens as they're called, or if you want to be one of those fans, are what you always bring to Mumbo himself to power up his spells. Song notes are this game's equivalent of coins. Find 100 of them in a level to add to your score total. You're still gonna need as many as you can get, as these notes act as progression gates, requiring you to have enough notes to keep things going. You'll be seeing Mumbo quite a bit through the game, and every time you see him, he'll always have a spell ready to transform you into some kind of animal or object to switch up your playstyle. They're entirely situational, but for the most part, they're pretty cool and actually control well depending on what I'm dealing with. And once you know how each transformation operates, you can even earn more Jiggies this way. Just prepare yourself for Mr. Vile. I've been warned about this fucker, and honestly, I get it. I always come so close to dying before I finally beat this guy by a landslide. And this happened verbatim in both versions, so maybe I just have dumb luck on my side. Who knows? As someone who enjoys his fair share of collectathons, I can definitely get behind what Banjo is offering. There's tons of great elements involving puzzle solving, platforming, making good use of your abilities, and having to outrace the clock in certain instances. It's all really good stuff. However, there are a few gripes I want to discuss. First off, as far as abilities go, the game decides to pull this odd switcheroo once you get to Gobi's Valley and Freeze Easy Peak. In Gobi's Valley, you learn the ability to run, which you'll need for Freeze Easy Peak, and in Freeze Easy Peak, you learn the Beak Bomb, which you definitely need for Gobi's Valley. It's confusing to say the least. The way I went around this was to grab the Beak Bomb in Freeze Easy Peak, head over to Gobi's Valley, and continue to play regularly. Then with the running shoes, I go back to Freeze Easy Peak and race Boggy for that one Jiggy I need to complete this world. Not how I usually go about things, but I'll take what I can get. Then there's the Beak Bomb itself. While flying itself is fine, I cannot say the same for this ability. It's always a pain having to target this thing, made worse by the fact that I have limited feathers to work on, so if you rush towards something and miss it, you're gonna be wasting a good amount of feathers just trying to hit one single target. Not saying that it can't be done, just be prepared to put up with some frustration. And speaking of frustration, this is the biggest gripe I have with this game, and what really deters me from coming back to the 64 version. Remember those song notes? Well, originally, the way it works is that if you ever die at any point in the stage, you have to start all over from square one, meaning you have to go after every single song note all over again. This really wouldn't be so bad except for the fact that some of these later stages really put you to the test, and making one simple mistake on any of these levels is more stressful and time consuming than it has any right to be. I'm especially looking at you, Rusty Bucket Bay. This is why in good conscience I strongly recommend you play this on Xbox, as this version took this oversight into account and makes playing through the later half of the game all the more digestible. That said, the stages themselves. They start off nice and easy and will continue to challenge you when you're towards the end. Many of them serve their purpose, some I outright groan to think about, and some of these I actually really like. Treasure Trove Cove is hands down among my favorites to explore. Just something about it is hitting all the right notes with me. And I realized what I just said. I also want to mention Click Clock Wood. In concept, it's really cool going from season to season to see this little bird go from a hatchling to a full-flesh majesty in a matter of minutes. In practice, it's actually playing the same stage 4 times in a row, with the only real difference being the enemies and obstacles on display. You're gonna be here a while, to put it bluntly, and to the right person, eventually it's bound to wear on you, me myself being one of them. There's a decent balance between what each level gives you, so going after Jiggies can either be a breeze to play, play or will require more effort to reap your reward. And so I don't forget to mention this, throughout Grunty's lair you'll come across some cleverly hidden secrets, such as Brentilda for example. She serves as Grunty's nicer sister and is usually around the area opening to a new level. Finding her here will give you all sorts of hints regarding Brentilda. Things like what her favorite pastime is, what kind of food she eats, what she wears under her dress. Just basically giving us her dirty laundry. It's imperative you remember all this because it comes back later during Grunty's final encounter. A trivia show of all things. Who honestly saw that coming? One interesting thing to know is that the hints you're given are completely random, so don't expect to get the same answers twice every playthrough. And depending on what the RNG gives you, you'll end up getting some rather interesting results. Also hidden in her lair is Cheeto. Cheeto! Finding this giant floating book will give you all sorts of cheats to enter. So once you find them, head back to Treasure Trove Cove and stomp the letters to enter the codes. They're especially helpful when you're close to finishing the game, so inputting these cheats now will save you many headaches later. Forgive me for sidetracking here, I kinda have no other place to put this, but why is the music in this game so catchy? Grant Kirkhope composed the music for Banjo-Kazooie, and he definitely delivered in setting the cutesy, charismatic atmosphere for the game. It's all solid stuff, and I can't help but smile when I hear it. Anyway, let's get into the big showdown with Brentilda. As stated before, you'll have to go through this bizarre quiz show where any wrong answer is bound to cost you. Once you reach Grunty and rescue Tooty, you would be forgiven for thinking this was the end of it. As the credits hit, Grunty's actually got one last trick up her sleeve. That's actually clever, by the way. And this is where the real finale kicks off. It kinda drags here and there, but for the most part, it serves to test all the skills you've learned through the game, right down to flying and zooming the stripe when she's in your sights. And despite the few gripes I have, the ending more than makes up for it as Grunty meets her well-deserved demise. Catharsis wouldn't even begin to describe it, it's all so good. Now assuming you've been collecting everything, this is where the game teases a sequel. On the 64, this originally hinted towards Banjo-Tooie, but on Xbox, they tweaked it so they make mention of Nuts and Bolts, this being a more controversial game that's bound to split hairs depending on who you talk to. Nonetheless, this all ties into a mechanic Rare wanted to implement for Banjo-Kazooie called the Stop and Swap. Upon finding these secret eggs, the idea is to switch out the cartridges as quickly as possible, making it so the collectibles you find in one game will instantly appear in the next. But because of how the Nintendo 64 was built, this never came to be. That's where the Xbox version shines once again, finally making this feature fully realized, and in this game's case it was definitely made all the sweeter. Grunty swears to exact her revenge, and this is where we leave Banjo-Kazooie. And may I say, this was well worth the time I put into this. I'm actually glad I hopped in and gave this game a proper chance to shine. It really holds up, and it's made all the better made by the additional benefits brought into the Xbox port. You would have to be one can short of a six-pack not to pick this game up. Whichever version you want to play though really depends on who you are. If you're an OG fan and want to stick with the 64 version, more power to you. Me personally, I strongly suggest picking up Rare Replay and seeing what the Bear and Bird have on full display. This was a fun breath of fresh air to dive into, and I'd gladly replay it as someone who enjoys this exact type of gaming. Now the big question is, will I ever check out Banjo-Tooie at some point? Well, at the moment, I'm not really sure. I'll want to mentally prepare myself for the much bigger game ahead of me. But for now, I'm happy with what I got from Banjo-Kazooie and would want to leave it at that. This is Miss Dan signing out. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.